Could you tell us about the Robinson-Huron Treaty and what it meant for the Anishnaabe of Bouting?
Um, well, the Robinson-Huron Treaty and the Robinson-Superior Treaty, for starters, William Robinson, who came up here to negotiate and sign those documents, had been a mine manager at Bruce Mine, so Shinwakonts knew him. William Robinson was also part of the Upper Canadian establishment and part of the group of people who had mining interests throughout the North Shore. So he himself, you couldn't say you couldn't say he had put all his business dealings aside and stepped away from them. I highly suspect he was dealing with his business interests in mind. Some of the people that were with Robinson, such as former Indian agent William Keating, had mines located that he'd speculated in, including apparently one on or near Garden River. I have to check exactly where he had it. But definitely he had interests at Bruce Mines. They had an American Métis man, George Johnston, who was willingly selling information about where mining locations were to these people, also working for the government. And other, ne'er-do-wells or do-wells, depending how you want to look at them, working for the government. On our side was Shinwakonts and the chiefs of the North Shore of Huron and Superior, and Robinson was instructed to get one treaty. Because he couldn't convince the leadership from basically Nebnegojing and Batchewana over to Penetanguishene, he couldn't convince them to sign under certain rotten conditions. And because a majority of the leadership from Lake Superior weren't at the meeting, because they were afraid of cholera, falling into a trap, misnegotiations, and other things, they refused to come. He quickly signed a treaty with the Robinson Superior people, and he basically said, well, you wanted me to do one, but I really did two. So they're really, there's quite similar documents, and they're supposed to be one treaty. For the government, it meant they got thousands of acres of land. For the government, they think it was a one-time land deal where we surrendered our sovereignty, we gave them permission to do all these mines. And the minute the treaty was signed, the government started breaking it, which is typical. The government of Canada signed the Nunavut Agreement in 1999 or what, in late 1990s. They're already breaking that one, right? I mean, it's just standard. They sign an agreement, they break it. But for us, the Anishnaabe, the idea behind it was that we would share land with the settlers. That was what they called the surrendered lands. Immediately problem there in interpretation, right? For us, we were sharing it. To them, we gave it to them. I'm dubious as to if that was exactly explained that way. Probably wasn't actually. I don't have to be dubious about it. For us, on our reserves, like the one at Garden River, our reserve at Garden River, it was withdrawn or withheld from sale, so it's really unceded land. The sovereignty was never given to the Canadian government. It was never shared with the government. It was intended for the Anishnaabe people, specifically Shinwak and his followers. So that was one thing it meant for us. It guaranteed us a huge land base that the government of Canada constantly whittled away until recently when we got some of it back, but they were constantly whittling away at it. It guaranteed us hunting and fishing rights throughout the region, so we could continue, for those who wanted to, could continue that way of life. It guaranteed a way of creating an economy on the reserve, because as far as Shinwak and others were concerned, actually all the leadership seems to have been had the idea that our reserves, we were sovereign on it, so we could do what we wanted on them. So if we wanted to set up, and they tried to do this, set up a steamer cordwood industry where they cut logs for the steamers for them to use on the boating in the lakes. We could do that. We could cut ships' timbers. We could do whatever we wanted that was our forests. If we wanted to sell the minerals on our land, Garden River has their stuff on Garden, we could sell those things. The Canadian government, however, the Upper Canadian government and later the Canadian government didn't see it that way. We put in Shinwak had an escalator clause, or managed to get an escalator clause inserted into the treaty, where we got an annuity every year, but when the government could afford it, the money would go up, right? Now, and I think the last time it went up was the 1880s to $4. Western groups, 16, 17, 18, 20, a lot more money. Whenever I talk to First Nation people from the West, they go, you only get $4? Really? $4? Yes. But the interesting thing about this is in 1867, the government of Canada creates this two-step on us without our permission. And the two-step is that Ontario gets to control all the public lands and resources in the province. The federal government gets a hold of First Nations. Well, if our annuity money is based on resource revenues, the Government of Canada is responsible for our annuity payments. The Government of Canada can't increase our annuity payments, they say, because they don't have any money. And the reason they have no money is they don't get resource revenues. That's the Government of Ontario. And the Government of Ontario doesn't give resource revenues to Ottawa to give to us. Right? So there's this little two-step dance they impose. I have friends who do Canadian history at this time period, and they argue that this was just the way they decided to do it, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it was, they say, oh, it was accidental, it was this, it was that, it was just assuage, independence feelings. I think for Upper Canadian negotiators, Sir John A. Macdonald and others, they knew very well it would undermine treaty rights by splitting lands and splitting who controlled First Nations. So, the treaty meant a great deal for us. It was supposed to, protect our sovereignty, ensure that we had a way of making our way in the world however our people wanted. If some wanted to, go to school, learn to read and write, and pursue businesses, barrel making, farming, those people could. Other people who wanted to continue pursuing what anthropologists and others have called our traditional ways. It's our ways, we could have, they could have done that. Right, but the Government of Canada, like I say, they pretty much started breaking the treaty once they signed it. So we're still fighting for that recognition. The chiefs of the North Shore, the chiefs in Sault Ste. Marie, are still fighting for those recognitions that these are our rights.